I woke up on day 3 and I was still dilated to 2 centimeters, and I was so frustrated. I begged and begged and begged my doctor to please just give me a C-section. I don't want to lay in this bed anymore. I couldn't get up and I couldn't walk around. I was starving. Like I was miserable. And she looked at me and she said that as much as she would be okay with doing one, I made them promise that unless it was a life-threatening emergency on either my side or hers, that I wanted to give birth vaginally, that I did not want a C-section. And I mean, she was right. I did ask them that, and I did tell them I didn't want one. But that didn't stop me from asking every chance that I got to have a C-section. And every time her answer was, no, we know what you wanted. Right now you're not at any kind of a risk. It just kind of sucks that you're stuck here. Yeah. Since nothing was progressing and we were on day 3 now, they decided to help out my cervix and place a little balloon, about that big, inside of it to kind of stretch it to help it expand, and hopefully get more things moving and speed everything up, because you know they don't want me to be sitting in the hospital for 4 weeks if they can help it. So they start all of that, and they come back and they check every now and then. You are able to go to the bathroom with that in there. It just feels really weird. And so I tried to avoid getting up and going to the bathroom as much as I could because of how weird it felt. About 2 hours later, I think it stays in you for 6 hours. 2 hours later, she came back, she checked, and you know, it was doing its job, but just not as quickly as they were hoping it would. And then she left, and I started feeling super sick. I had just been eating, other than that meal I had had that night before, I had just been eating broth and Jell-O, and I actually am insulin resistant. So eating something like that honestly probably did more harm than good to my body. So I started throwing up. I asked my husband if he could ask his mom to leave because I was going to be sick, and right as he started to ask her to step out of the room, I started throwing up. And it was red because I had been eating red Jell-O and didn't think about if I was to throw up. I didn't think I was going to throw up, that it would look like I had blood in my vomit. I called the nurse in because it freaked me out a little bit, and she came and she emptied it out, and she asked me if I had been eating Jell-O or if that was blood inside of my vomit. I was like, I've been eating Jell-O, I don't think it's blood. But the thought did cross my mind that it might have been blood. So then after that, my husband and my mom, they went to Target to kind of find something to keep everybody warm because everyone was freezing half to death in that room, and to get me a nursing bra because I didn't have any of that. I was planning on actually that weekend going and getting all of it. And so he went through that. He went and got Jell-O that was not red colored. He ended up getting me blue Jell-O. And that way, if that ever happened again, I could, you know, it wouldn't be red. No one would think it was blood. While they were gone, they came back, and it had been 6 hours since they put the balloon in, and it was time for it to come out, so they checked everything. I had finally dilated to a 6, so they pulled the balloon out, and they were able to break my water. Soon after that, Andrew got home, or not got home. We were in the hospital so long, it felt like a home. No. He got back to the hospital, and I filled him in on what all was going on. time, and we were getting excited. You know, it was finally getting closer to when we can meet this little one. See, it was probably about 2 o'clock when that all happened. Later that day, some of our friends came to visit, and I recommend bringing a robe to the hospital. Even if you don't think you're going to be there very long, it's still a good thing to have, because I'm pretty sure my friend and her boyfriend, I'm pretty sure that they saw my butt when I got up to use the bathroom. But I was so drugged up on magnesium, I really didn't care at the time. I care now. It was a little awkward thinking about it. So they stayed for a little while, then they left to go get dinner, and then Andrew's partner came by while he was visiting his wife, who also works in the hospital. And they were talking, and she actually came up to take my blood. They were drawing my blood multiple times a day. I can't remember why, but it had to be done like every 3 hours. It was kind of exhausting, especially at night. You know, you're dead asleep and then someone pricks your arm. She was the only one who actually did my blood, who didn't make it feel like my vein was being ripped out, which was very nice. None of the other hospital personnel would listen to me when I had told them where the blood needed to come from. They're like, no, it's easier to get it on this side or over here or down here. Not for me. So finally, the anesthesiologist comes in because I was dilated to a 6, and they say they can go ahead and start the epidural if I want one. And I was like, yes, give it to me. Give me all the drugs. So they asked me, you know, are you okay with a student giving you the epidural? And I was like, well, I mean, I guess so. I assumed that he had gone through all the proper training and had at least practiced on some people before and kind of knew what he was doing. He didn't know what he was doing. So they rose the bed up, and I was probably 4 or 5 feet up in the air, which is a lot for me because I am actually terrified of heights. I don't do heights. That was terrifying. And epidurals, they feel weird also, just the forewarning. So he starts doing his thing, you know, he wipes my back down with the little like antiseptic sponge or antibacterial stuff that they use. And then he's doing stuff, and he puts the needle in and pulls it out, and he goes, oh, oops. What do I do now? There's liquid coming out. And I was like, what now? What did you just do to me? Am I paralyzed? Like I was freaking out a little bit. My husband was a little nervous. It was interesting. So the woman who knew what she was doing came around, and she finished it up for him, and it felt very strange. I don't know what they put on my back. It left scars. I've got multiple scars down my spine from the epidural now. So after they finished their thing, lowered the bed back down, and they leave, I noticed that the epidural isn't going over to my right side. I'm sitting up straight because if, depending on how you lay or stand with an epidural, I mean, you don't want to stand with it because it'll all rush down to your feet. But that's where the medicine goes. So if you lay on your right side, it moves over to the right side. If you lay on your left side, it stays on the left side. I was sitting up straight in the bed like I am right now, and it was just staying in this one little spot on my left hip. So, but by the time I was able to get a nurse to come in and explain what was going on, the anesthesiology team was already in a C-section. So they weren't able to come and redo the epidural until they finished with that several hours later. So I was like, okay, well, you know, it's getting late now. I might as well just go to sleep and wait until they can give me the epidural again. I didn't realize it was really only 6 o'clock at that point, but I was so exhausted, and you know, I didn't know what time it was. So I was like, it feels late, I'll go to sleep. I slept a lot while I was in the hospital. So they came back at, I think it was close to 9, sometime between 9 and 11 to redo the epidural. That one didn't take as well. I don't know if it was just because I had 2 separate students that did it or what was going on, but my epidural did not work at all. I mean, and it was just my hip that it worked on. The second time was my right hip, but it didn't work where it needed to work, so I could feel everything. And the contractions, they were starting to get more intense. It had been a while since they had checked how far along I was, but they told me I couldn't have any food because I could go into, active labor and have to start pushing at any moment. So I had to sit there starving for another night. So I just kind of sat up and chatted with my husband for a little bit, and he was like, you really need to get some rest. Like, you've been going through a lot. I'll be right here if you wake up. So I went to sleep, and it was close to midnight. So after I fell asleep at about midnight on the 15th, which ended up being starting my 4th day in the hospital, I woke up at 3:30 in the morning in searing pain. I was finally in active labor. I remember my mom telling me that you'll know when you need to push and when it's time, because when the baby enters, I guess, the birth canal, it feels like you really have to poop. And I felt that, and I was like, oh, something's off. So I called the nurse in and I told her what was going on. She said, okay, let me go get the doctor. So she ran out and came back with the doctor a couple minutes later. The doctor checked me. She said that I am dilated to a 10 and I am good to go and start pushing. So they brought all their equipment in. The nurse was there and so was the doctor. There was only the 2 of them. I guess everybody else that was supposed to be in the room was with other people. Because I think there were supposed to be more than just the nurse, one nurse and the doctor, from everybody I've talked to. So my husband actually had to help and hold my legs back. So I started pushing at 3:45 and I was exhausted. I would pass out in between each push. They would have to wake me up and keep me awake so that I could push. I was so exhausted and drained and weak. And they were cheering me on, and I had like my own little cheerleader squad there trying to help encourage me to push, but I was just so exhausted. And finally I asked if there was anything that she could do to help me, that I don't think I could go much longer, and I knew at that point, because of where she was positioned inside my body, that there was no way they could do a C-section safely. And she told me that she can use the forceps to help get this little one out. There are risks, the risk for infection is higher. I will tear a lot worse than I would if I didn't use those. And that, it could cause some drooping on her face, but that's usually just temporary and goes away within about 24 hours. And it also caused some bruising on her head, but it's nothing too serious that would cause any concern, especially with how exhausted I was. And she said I needed the help. So I told her, yeah, go ahead, do what you need to do. So I'm finally pushing, and she gets those things in there, and my poor husband saw all of that go in. He said that was so much blood, and I felt all of it. Mind you, my epidural didn't work, so I could feel everything. And honestly, childbirth does not hurt as bad as I thought it was going to hurt. I was thinking it would be this horrible, horrific pain, but it really wasn't as bad as I expected. So he's there, he's holding my leg back, and they're telling me, okay, one last push and she'll be out. So I do that one last push and she's finally out. She's not crying. I don't remember if she had some fluid built up or what was going on, but they rushed her over and did their little thing. And while they were doing that, my husband went over to be with the baby, and the doctor delivers the placenta, and she starts stitching me up, and I ask her, is it really a girl? Not asking if Abigail was okay, no. Is it really a girl? because I had my doubts for some reason and I thought that tech was wrong who did our scan, but she laughed at me. She said, no, it's a girl. So she's stitching me up, and they placed Miss Abigail on my chest, and it was the most amazing feeling in the entire world. She was born at 4:30 in the morning on September 15th. She weighed 6 pounds 12 ounces, and she was 19¼ inches long, and she was the most perfect little angel. Who's right now very fuzzy because it is getting close to nap time. She didn't have to spend any time in the NICU, and we were so grateful for that. Usually they would have to spend some time in there because she was early. But yeah, the moment that they put her on my chest, it made it all worth it. And I would do it over and over again 1,000,000 times as long as I got her out of it. And I do just want to say that just because of what I experienced, you know, it might be different than what you experienced. Every birth is unique, just like the people that are involved in the birth. And every story, no matter how textbook and simple it is to how complex and crazy it may be, every birth story deserves to be told. And we are amazing, and our bodies are amazing for growing these little humans inside of us so perfectly and in such a short amount of time. So I hope you enjoyed my, or not my birth story, her birth story. And we will see you next time. Say bye, Abby.